have, as many of you have had the experience of feeling the pressure of representing all women, and I've also had the experience of feeling the pressure of representing all Black people. I think this is the first time I formally felt the pressure of representing the entire United States of America. And I really want to thank Fran Villamoria, who did outreach, the first one when we got this assignment, and thank you WFN, and thank you Michelle for the invitation. I said, well, we've got to reach out to other funds and other member centers to find out what kind of message we really need to share. And I want to give a special shout out to the Washington Area Women's Foundation and the Chicago Foundation for Women for helping us really think about what would be the most important messages, given that, like Eleanor, it's nearly impossible. I'm also very happy that the United States is being represented and thought of, because one of the messages that came from our member funds was that often when we think about women globally, America is a little more invisible than we would imagine, and that it's important to think about women's rights and women's issues here at home in the US. It's very, very important. So in some ways, I'm at home right now. My dad and my mom are from Los Angeles. My dad is from Watts. He was one of 13 children, and my parents left Watts in the 1970s. It was a rough place then, it was a rough time, and the military was their way out. My dad joined the Army. He went through college on the GI Bill, eventually earned a PhD in theology. And 3 years ago, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was having this sentimental moment where I was telling him on the phone about what I wanted for this child. And I asked him, Daddy, when Mom was pregnant with me, what did you want for me? And he got quiet. He said, baby, I'm embarrassed about my answer to that question. And I said, how could you possibly be embarrassed about what you wanted for me? And he said, well, to tell you the truth, when your mom was pregnant with you, what I most wanted was for you to graduate from high school and not get pregnant. He said, the woman that you've become, I didn't know existed when your mom was pregnant with you. He said, we just hoped. Because of the unique ability and the opportunity in America for people to experience dramatic social mobility, upward mobility, my parents were able to obliterate a cycle, a very vicious cycle of poverty and addiction and violence in our family. So I am sitting here today as a product of the American dream. And I'm very proud of that promise and that dream. And I'm also concerned because I think now more than ever, that dream is in jeopardy, particularly for women and girls in this country. And it's part of the reason why my life's work is advancing women and girls, and why I'm on the planet, and why I do this work every day. What's interesting is that, in this presidential election year, there's actually been a lot of focus and attention on women and on women's issues, on reproductive rights, on healthcare policies, on what really defines women's work, as evidenced by the exchange between Hillary Rosen and Ann Romney, and aptly dubbed, into some degree, the war on women, which we're all familiar with and we've heard. What's interesting is that half of the population does not one demographic make. And women ourselves, in some ways, are often divided on these issues. But the one issue that we're all on the same page about, and that really undergirds and is significant in this country, is our economy. And the fact that the divide between the rich and the poor has increasingly, over time in our country, gotten larger and larger and larger and larger, and that this is having major implications on women and girls. The first implication really is around what economic inequality does for self-sufficiency, for the lack of options, and in this state in particular, which has been one of the hardest hits, nearly 6 out of 10 women who are single women are unemployed. right? Which is really staggering when you think about what that does for your ability to escape domestic violence, your ability to educate your children, your ability to feed your children, and really to have the kind of options that are necessary and the kind of support that is necessary through all kinds of programs to be able to achieve that upward mobility. So that American promise is in jeopardy. The other implication for those of us especially who are interested in government and our democracy is that economic inequality really does impede and really does undermine the fabric of democracy because it's very difficult to have political equality when there isn't economic equality. And for the United States, for a country where our democracy has been one of our greatest strengths, the unraveling of that is quite precocious and really is something that we need to pay close attention to. At the White House Project, we're focused on advancing the leadership of women in business and in politics, and we focus mostly on young women. I think she said women 21 to 35. And our economy has had a particularly devastating impact on this group as well. Women who are 18 to 29 have an unemployment rate of nearly 40% in this country, which is the highest in over 3 generations. And couple that with the fact that what's most important to this generation of women is independence and their deep need and appreciation for wanting to make an impact in the world, to be socially responsible and conscious. I actually believe there's an enormous opportunity to really harness their circumstances and their situation, but also their passion and their energy to help not just women, but to help all of us. When I was growing up, my dad used to have these conspiracy theories about how there was a small elite group of people that were running the world. And I used to think my dad was crazy, and I would be so embarrassed when my friends would come over and he would be talking about all of these theories, and I would say, oh, you know, that's just my dad. And I have to tell you, I had to apologize to my dad not that long ago. I don't think my dad was crazy at all right now. You know, the more that I learn and the more that I grow, I realize that my dad was actually right. There is a very small group of people at the highest levels in government, in corporations, who are making decisions that are impacting every single one of us. Every single one of us. And until that group of people is both expanded and diversified with more women, with more people of color, I actually believe that the biggest crisis that women face in this country is a crisis of leadership. It's a crisis of leadership. And if we don't immediately begin to put attention on strategies to shift the face of power in this country, I think that it's going to be even worse than it is now. One of the opportunities that we have is that people who, particularly in politics, are right now leading and making decisions, the public really feels are out of touch with people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And interestingly enough, the public actually supports and is encouraged when women run because they believe that they have a perception that women are more in touch with people's real lives than some of the people that are in power now. And so we actually have an opportunity to both combine the power of our democracy, the trend toward a real mistrust of government and politicians, and this real clear perception that women bring that vision and that perspective to the table, I think, to really change the balance of power. The White House Project can close its doors. We can go out of business when all levels of leadership are diversified with women equipped to lead in the 21st century. And I will share just 3 of the outcomes that we're focused on right now in order to get there. The first is increasing the number of women who have the leadership assets we know are required in order for them to be successful. And we know this because over the course course of a number of years, we've trained 14,000 of them across the country. 53% are women of color. Many of them are low income. And they really have a different vision for how we can shift the balance of power and how we can create policy that will address the issues that our women are facing in this country. The second is really increasing the number of women who are actively pursuing and obtaining positions of power and influence. Women have great ideas about how to make the world a better place, but we often don't understand how an investment in our leadership is the most efficient strategy to actually making that happen. And then the third is making sure that we have the right mentors and sponsors that will help us to get where we want to go. My dad used to always say, Tiffany, if you want something that you've never had before, you're going to have to do something that you've never done before in order to get it. And I believe that the biggest opportunity that we have in this country is actually to harness the ingenuity and the talent and the power of women with the strength of our democracy in order to really address issues that are impacting women and girls, but that are impacting all of us. And I really appreciate the opportunity to represent today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's definitely a hard job to follow such an articulate and moving presentation. And thank you so much for sharing that. As you were speaking, one of my favorite quotes kept coming to mind. It's June Jordan's, "We are the ones that we're waiting for." And so thinking about the fact that we are the ones to talk, when we talk about investing in leadership and when we talk about the need for ensuring that women are in decision-making spaces. I think that's what we need to be doing and thinking about more. So thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to Emilenne to tell us a little bit about, I guess you also have the difficult task, but you will talk a little bit about Mexico and the region as well.
Okay, I rather like instead of, well, when we organize these sessions, speak out at the regional level, we thought more geographically rather than the cultural divisions of the world of the nations. So in a way, Mexico is part of North America. We are part, economically, we are part of NAFTA. We have more than 2,000 kilometers of border with the United States. But culturally, we are Latin America. So I cannot speak a lot about Mexico because even Eleanor has already said many of the issues that are affecting women. But I want to stress 2 or 3 points. But first of all, I would like to say that I represent now the International Network of Women's Funds. It's a peer network with WFN, and we have 45 members all over the world. And many of them, I think at least half of them, are also members of WFN. So this is why we are looking for sharing experiences and trying to get more closer, not only the 2 entities as networks, as membership associations, but the women's funds that are in the United States with the women's funds that are outside of the United States. I would like to say also that even though we don't have a women's fund established in the MENA region, in the Arab region, we do have funds internationally that are supporting women's organizations in the region. So Global Fund for Women, Mama Cash, Urgent Action Fund, FRIDA, because you're, and the Young Feminist movement, it's supported by FRIDA. So we have support of the Mediterranean Women's Funds that it's based in France, in Montpellier, but she's working with all the countries in the Mediterranean African part of the sea. So we have been supporting women in the region. It's needed that if it's possible, I don't know, is it feasible? Normally you think, well, let's create a women's fund. And creating a women's fund, it's a tough thing to do. It's not easy. So we have to figure out if it's possible, at least at the regional level, have one in the region. But we are supporting them through the International Women's Fund. We have been talking around all this great conference, and I really congratulate and thanks a lot Michelle and Cynthia and all the staff and board of WFN of organizing this conference the way you have done. It has been a difference, and we feel at the international level, and you can see many women's funds here, we feel more integrated. We feel more that the political analysis is in place, so we can share more with the other women's funds in United States. So we have been talking.